Good day, everyone. My name is Chuck Marty from the Performance Office at the Connecticut State Department of Education. With me today are two colleagues from the Performance Office, Dave Alexandro and Stephanie O'Day. We hope that this webinar will help guide you through our newest report, the EIT for Teachers, so that you can get the most from it and in doing so, bring the data to life so that it can be used to enhance your students' academic careers. A link to the PDF version of this slide deck will be available on the Professional Support Series for Districts section of our website. In this webinar, we focus primarily on introducing the early indication tool for teachers. I'll start by giving an overview of EdSite Secure and how you go about getting access through your district security manager. Next, I'll describe the new EIT for Teachers report in general terms and talk about why we created it. Next, I'll go over the highlights of the EIT, Connecticut's early warning system, for those of you who are not as familiar with it as you'd like. Then I'll hand the webinar over to Dave and he'll walk us through a discussion of the EIT support levels and data elements, some of the gaps that the cancellation of last year's summative assessments created, and then discuss some of the methods in which SDE has tried to fill those gaps, most notably with statistical estimates of smarter balanced results for 2019-20. Finally, Stephanie will provide a description and a demo of the EIT for Teachers report, including how to use the batch data lookup tool to distribute the report's contents to staff members in a comprehensive, color-coded, student-level spreadsheet. So, what is EdSite Secure? It's our secure online data portal for designated LEA staff. It's a way for those authorized users to access unsuppressed student-level data. It contains several reports covering Smarter Balanced Achievement and Growth, SAT School Day results, FAFSA completion, the student summary, EIT, and more. And more than just a secure vehicle for sharing data, EdSite Secure is a data analytics and visualization tool. It includes myriad charts, graphs, and data tables, opportunities for you to filter, disaggregate, export, and really engage and explore the data. So we strongly encourage you to use EdSite Secure. It has a wealth of information beyond what is in the EdSite public data portal. This slide is for those of you who don't have access to EdSite Secure already. We have a process that begins with the superintendent designating which individuals in the district will be authorized to access EdSite Secure. Privileges are granted either at the school or the district level. Next, your district security manager will create the account or assign roles depending on what level of access you should have. Then, within an hour, you'll be able to log in and access all of this information. If you're not sure who your LEA security manager is, the link provided at the bottom of this slide will take you to the PDF containing contact information for all LEA managers. EIT for Teachers is our newest EdSite Secure report. Through EIT for Teachers, we sought to leverage the data in the existing EIT report, which is longitudinal, cross-domain data for students in your charge. It also provides the EIT support level, as well as estimated scale scores for the 2019-20 Smarter Balanced Assessments and corresponding growth targets for the present school year. These are data elements that may be of use to you as you engage the students in the fall, many for the first time. As with other EdSite Secure reports, the data are updated each day to reflect the student's current district and school registration. Because the pandemic created gaps in assessment, engagement, and other data after the schools closed, SDE thought of ways to reach out to educators in the state who would be seeing their incoming students this fall with some of their academic history missing. So we created this report along with the batch data lookup tool to assist educators so that they may spend more time engaging their students and less time and fewer resources on assessment. Not only does the report provide EdSite Secure users with historical cross-domain data for all students in all grades in their district or school, it also includes the means to disseminate this data to educators in a comprehensive, visually enhanced spreadsheet through the Batch Data Lookup tool. Districts can decide how best to get the data to those who need it most. The lookup tool is provided to make it easier to customize reports for districts' own rosters of students by grade, by course, or by teacher. Stephanie will walk you through how to use this tool later in the webinar. For those of you who aren't familiar with our early warning system or early indication tool, I'll outline its features. Developed in-house by SDE staff over the past 4 years, the EIT is a data analytics and visualization tool for district and school personnel. It provides a historical view of students' data, as well as an assessment of the level of support that individual students may need to reach academic milestones. It uses statistical methods to differentiate support levels based on an estimation of the likelihood that students will achieve the outcome of interest. In short, it gives educators a tool to discern the appropriate level and type of support each student may need. The report itself contains not only exportable data tables, but interactive charts that allow users to filter by school, grade level, and student groups, and to disaggregate using crosstabs, which can also be exported. Cells in the tables are color-coded according to data values to give users some insight into the student support level designation. This slide describes an approach to early warning that we're calling a mile marker approach. The EIT breaks down the student career into 4 mile markers. So we're not trying to predict, for example, how likely it is that a second grader will be college and career ready by grade 12. Instead, we look at most 3 years ahead. This approach enhances the predictive power of our models and allows us to present the data more efficiently, showing only those fields most relevant to student outcomes. For example, EIT provides kindergarten inventory results only for 1st through 3rd graders. All students from grades 1 to 12 are in the EIT. For students in grades 1, 2, and 3, you can see milestone 1 at the bottom of the slide. For those students, the milestone we're looking at is reaching ELA proficiency on the Smarter Balanced Assessment by the end of 3rd grade. For students in grades 4, 5, and 6, that's mile marker 2, their milestone is math and ELA proficiency in the 6th grade Smarter Balanced. We are using patterns that we find in past data to determine the likelihood that current students will reach both math and ELA proficiency by the end of 6th grade. For grades 7, 8, and 9, mile marker 3, those students were looking at the likelihood of being on track, a measure which looks at credit accrual and course performance in 9th grade as an indicator of whether a student is on track to graduate high school in 4 years. Finally, for students in grades 10, 11, and 12, we're looking at college and career readiness measures based on the number of college and career preparation courses the student has passed, as well as SAT exam scores. The targets that we have designated for students are actually the dependent or outcome variables in the prediction models. Now I'll ask Dave Alexandro, who's been waiting in the on-deck circle, to continue this presentation.
Thanks, Chuck. So when you're viewing the early indication tool and the EIT for Teachers reports, you'll see that each student has a support level associated with their record. In this slide, I'll provide some background on how that support level was designated. To determine EIT support levels, we've run statistical and machine learning models. Essentially, what we're doing is we're using patterns in the data to help us identify students who may struggle to reach that next academic milestone. Statewide, the students that have the lowest likelihood of meeting the academic milestone, that 25% of students in each grade, they're assigned to the high support level. The rightmost bar that you see in this slide summarizes the information for the high support level. As we look to the middle of the slide, we see that the next 35% of students fall into the medium support level. Finally, the students who have the highest probability, the 40% of students that have the highest likelihood of reaching the milestone, they're in the low support group. It's really important to know that these probabilities are based on past data. So we have hundreds of thousands of student records in our data warehouse, and we work to discover patterns that have resulted in different performance over the years. It's very important, of course, to note that the support levels are not deterministic. We're not saying that the student will meet the outcome or will fail to meet the outcome. What we're saying is this: based on what we've seen in the past, students that have had similar test scores, attendance, mobility, behavior, and all the variables that go into these models, we're suggesting for those students in the medium and high support levels that the districts and schools take a closer look and consider additional interventions to really help the students reach the academic milestones that Chuck described earlier. For Connecticut Public Schools, the cancellation of Smarter Balanced, or SBAC, summative assessments in the spring of 2020 resulted in gaps in both the evaluation of student learning and the calculation of accountability measures. For the 2019-20 school year, we don't have statewide results to assess the mastery of learning outcomes, and we don't have school level and district level measures of achievement and growth. Now, that's completely understandable, as the transition to distance learning in March was necessary to ensure the health and safety of our students and teachers. Still, in the performance office at the State Department of Education, we sought to address assessment-related gaps. Specifically, we looked to develop a way to systematically estimate the missing SBAC scores to help classroom teachers. As Chuck said earlier, we want to maximize student engagement and learning. During this process, we considered a range of data modeling methods. We leveraged available data beyond SBAC scores, and we accounted for the uncertainty of the estimates. Next, we looked for the best way to report the estimated scores and growth targets. I want to spend some time describing the rationale and methods used to systematically estimate the 2020 SBAC scores. To start, we established that we wanted to estimate both ELA and math scale scores. So we developed a grade-specific model for each test. In order to develop predictive models, it's important to first have a large training sample. Ideally, that training sample will have recent outcomes on which to model estimates. With that in mind, we used the 2019 SBAC scale scores as the outcome in our training models in order to estimate the 2020 SBAC scale scores. We considered a range of models, including everything from basic linear regression models to advanced growth models. Throughout the process, we sought to maximize the number of students for whom we could make estimates. In addition, we wanted to leverage all of the data in our statewide longitudinal data warehouse. In other words, we didn't want to simply use prior SBAC scores to estimate future SBAC scores. In addition, we considered missing data. We used a range of imputation methods to address missing values. This approach increased the number of student records on which the models were trained. More important, it increased the number of students for whom the prediction models could be applied. Since students with disabilities, students of color, students from families experiencing poverty, and English learners are disproportionately represented among those with missing scores, imputing values was a critical component to maximize the inclusion of all student groups. There's a wealth of research to support the use of non-assessment variables to capture additional context and improve estimates. We found that including cross-domain longitudinal data resulted in better estimates for all of our models. So, our models incorporate status fields, including whether a student has an IEP, is eligible for free reduced lunch, is an English learner, and any combination of these three high needs designations. Beyond simple yes/no status fields, we include multiple years of other student level information, including attendance, mobility, discipline incidents, and detailed special education data. We also found that kindergarten entrance inventory scores, in combination with these other variables, help in estimating grade 3 SBAC scores. Lastly, school and district level indices from the Next Generation Accountability System helped improve estimates. Scores were estimated using multi-level linear regression modeling techniques. These multi-level models best captured the hierarchical structure of the data, as all students are nested within schools. In grades 6 and 7, we developed growth models that incorporated student performance over time. In all cases, modeling the statistical effects occurring at multiple levels of aggregation helped improve scale score estimates. The estimates for the 2020 SBACs, both ELA and math, are provided in the EIT for teachers, along with estimate intervals that capture the uncertainty of the estimates. Again, we hope that these estimates will help aggregate data in a way that will inform instruction and allow teachers to target interventions without having to administer a grade or school-wide pretest to all students. Since teachers and administrators are familiar with Connecticut's growth model, we use the growth model tables to determine growth targets. When you see a 2021 target SBAC score in the EIT for teachers, it's simply the sum of the 2020 estimate and the corresponding growth target. While the estimated SBAC scores and growth targets will be helpful for students in grades 4 through 8, the EIT for teachers provides student-level data for all students. We have provided this slide to give you an overview of the range of data fields available, including everything from demographics to discipline. Since Stephanie will be showing you many of these fields and will point you to additional documentation, I will turn things over to her now. I'm pleased to introduce Stephanie O'Day, who will walk you through the EIT for Teachers report and the batch data lookup tool.
Thanks, Dave. Again, in order to access the EIT for Teachers report, you need to be an authorized user. Once you are an authorized user, you will have a unique username and password and can log in to EdSite Secure in one of two ways. You can either navigate to the directory manager, which we're calling the Portals application website on this slide, or you can go directly to EdSite Secure. I just like to remind people that if you're on a computer where you don't have a favorite saved or you can't remember the URL for EdSite Secure, you can actually just Google EdSite Secure, and the first link you will find on Google will be the login. Once you enter your credentials and sign in, you will hopefully be brought to this next page, which is called the Welcome to EdSite Secure report. I say hopefully because the intention is that your view should default to this report. Unfortunately, we know that sometimes this isn't the case, and I'll discuss that in the next slide. From the Welcome to EdSite Secure report, click EIT for Teachers under Students. As I mentioned, sometimes you don't get brought automatically to that Welcome to EdSite Secure report. You may see the folder icon at the top of this slide, which says no reports were found. Don't worry if you see this, just click Browse for reports and follow the path below. Select Welcome to EdSite Secure and click Open. You will then be brought to the Welcome to EdSite Secure report. Again, from this screen, simply click EIT for Teachers to access the report. The report opens to the tab entitled All Variables. On this tab, you will notice report filters in the upper right-hand corner, which allow you to filter the data in a list table based upon school, grade, and days enrolled. In addition, you will notice a blank area with the word filters. Any filters you select above will be reflected in this area. Below this, you will see the list table. The functionality in this list table is the same for all EdSite Secure reports. You may sort the data by single or multiple columns, resize columns, and scroll to see additional columns. In order to export the data contained in this list table, simply hover over the upper right-hand corner of the report. Double chevrons will then appear. Hover over those and click the export icon seen in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. In order to use a tool we will demonstrate at the end of this presentation, you will need to export data from this report. The second tab of this report is the Selected Variables by Grade tab. You will notice that the filters seen on the first tab also appear here, and that any filter selections you made on the first tab carry through to the rest of the report. Remember that any selected filters are indicated above the list table. On this tab, there are 3 list tables divided by grade range. A subset of the variables most appropriate to the grade range are shown in each list table. Only a 2-year look back is provided in these tables, rather than all available data shown on the All Variables tab. For instance, in the grades 4 through 8 tab, attendance is only shown going back to grade 2. Whereas in the All Variables tab, you are able to see all available attendance data for a student. In order to avoid excessive scrolling, you may want to maximize the list tables on this tab by hovering over the upper right-hand corner of the list table and selecting the Expand or Maximize icon. These tables are also exportable, but cannot be used in the tool we will demo shortly. It is important to note that the Smarter Balanced Scale Score and Growth Target estimates are only contained in the grades 4 through 8 list table on this tab. The third tab of this report is the Resources tab. In this tab, you will find step-by-step how-to documents with screenshots, as well as FAQs, glossary and data definitions, and methods and rationale documents. The how-to documents are divided into those pertaining to EIT for teachers, the EIT full report, and EdSite Secure in general. Unique to this report, there is also that Excel tool that both Chuck and Dave mentioned. This is included to facilitate sharing of data with teachers and is called the Batch Data Lookup tool. And now I will demo how to use the Batch Data Lookup tool. Hello, this video will demonstrate how to use the Batch Data Lookup tool in the EIT for Teachers report. The steps in this video assume you have already logged in to EdSite Secure and opened the EIT for Teachers report. Once you have completed those steps, you will need to navigate to the All Variables tab. The EIT for Teachers report contains the following tabs: All Variables, Selected Variables by Grade, 2-year look back, and Resources. In order to use the Batch Data Lookup tool, you must first navigate to that All Variables tab. On this tab, you can filter the list table using the filters in the upper right-hand corner of the report. You do not have to filter the list table, but it may make the data more manageable to work with in the Batch Data Lookup tool. Please note that the Batch Data Lookup tool allows for up to 5,000 rows of data. Next, you will need to export data from the list table on this tab. To do this, hover over the double chevrons in the upper right-hand corner of the list table and click the Export icon. After clicking the Export icon, the Export dialog box will appear. Click OK to download the file. Do not check the Detailed Data checkbox. Open the exported data and enable editing. Return to the report and navigate to the Resources tab. From here, download the Batch Data Lookup tool under the Resources heading. Open the Batch Data Lookup tool and enable editing. Now you will need to copy and paste your exported data into the first tab of the Batch Data Lookup tool. Note that there are multiple methods of copying and pasting data, including keyboard shortcuts and menu options. Once you have navigated to the Export Excel, click the Select All button in the upper left of the worksheet, to the left of the A. This will select all cells in the worksheet. Right-click anywhere on the selection and click Copy. Next, navigate back to the Batch Data Lookup tool, called EIT for Teachers. Ensure you are on the Exported Data tab. Select cell A1, labeled Select this cell and paste data. Right-click and select Paste. Finally, you will need to use a roster from your district or school in order to display the formatted report for a select group of students. For the purposes of this demonstration, I will select a group of SACIDs as if this were your roster and move on to the next step. Once you have this group of SACIDs, you will need to paste them into the second tab, Formatted Report, of the Batch Data Lookup tool. Select cell A2 and paste those SACIDs from your roster into that column. Data fields will populate automatically once SACIDs are pasted. Included in this Formatted Report tab is a Teacher Name ID column. This has been added to allow pasting SACIDs from more than one teacher roster at a time. You will notice some of the conditional formatting that has been built into the Data tab and is continued throughout other variables. Also note that the final columns include smarter balanced estimates with intervals, as well as smarter balanced growth target estimates. A final optional step includes copying and pasting these formatted results into a new tab. To facilitate removal of formulas and sharing among teachers, you may wish to copy and paste the data with source formatting into a new tab. This will ensure that the underlying data are stored, not the formulas, and that the conditional formatting, for example, the shading of the cells based upon value, is visible. You can either select all or a group of cells within the sheet. Right-click anywhere on the selection and select Copy. Click the Insert Worksheet tab with the plus mark at the bottom of the screen. Right-click cell A1 on the New tab, which will be called Sheet 1. Select Paste Special and paste source values and source formatting. You will now notice when you select a cell that had previously included a formula, you now only show the value. To remove the non-applicable markers, you can select those cells and click Delete. That concludes this how-to video. We hope you have found it helpful, and we also encourage you to refer to the other how-to documents on the Resources tab of this report. Thank you.